Hello, English learners! Welcome back to another episode of Core English. I am your host, Lana Rose, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Learning English doesn't have to be boring, and that's exactly why we're here. In each episode, we break things down step by step, nice and easy, so you can really enjoy the process and see your English skills grow. So, if you are listening at home, on the bus, or maybe even while making your breakfast, get ready because today's episode has as its theme the phrase, "Stop speaking broken English." You're ready? So let's go start. I have a confession to make. Last week, I overheard a conversation at a coffee shop that absolutely broke my heart. A brilliant Brazilian engineer was trying to explain his groundbreaking project to potential investors. His ideas were revolutionary, his passion was undeniable, but his English was holding him back. The investors couldn't see past the broken English to appreciate the genius behind it. And that got me thinking, how many amazing people are out there right now with incredible ideas, fascinating stories, and so much to offer the world, but they're trapped behind the walls of broken English? How many dreams are being postponed because someone thinks their English isn't good enough yet? Well, today we're going to demolish those walls once and for all. I'm going to share with you the 3 biggest myths about broken English that are keeping you stuck, the surprising truth about what native speakers actually care about when they're talking to them, and here's the kicker. I'm going to reveal the one simple mindset shift that transformed my most struggling student into someone who now gives presentations to international audiences with complete confidence. But first, let me tell you about Maria. And you know what happened? The entire audience of 3,000 people, including native English speakers from 5 different countries, gave her a standing ovation, not despite her English, but because her ideas were so powerful that her unique way of expressing them actually made her more memorable, more authentic, more her. That's when it hit me. The problem isn't broken English. The problem is broken confidence. Now, I know what you're thinking, but I make mistakes. I mix up tenses, I forget articles, I use the wrong prepositions. And yes, you probably do. But here's the secret that changed everything for Maria and hundreds of my other students. Native speakers make mistakes too. Just yesterday, I heard my neighbor say, "Me and my wife went to the store." Grammatically, it should be "my wife and I," but guess what? Communication happened. Message received. Life went on. The difference is that native speakers don't stop mid-sentence, apologize for their grammar, and lose confidence. They keep talking because they know something you might not realize yet. Communication is about connection, not perfection. But let's get practical. I know you want real strategies, not just motivational speeches. So let me give you the 3 game-changing techniques that helped Maria transform from someone who was afraid to speak to someone who now leads international video calls with ease. Technique number 1, the completion principle. Instead of stopping every time you make a mistake, Complete your thought first, then correct yourself if necessary. For example, instead of saying, I went, yesterday went to the market, try this. Yesterday I go to the market. I went to the market. See the difference? You communicated the complete idea, maintained your flow, and then made a quick correction. Your listener understood you perfectly the first time, and the correction just showed them you know the right form too. This technique alone increased Maria's speaking confidence by 300% in just 2 weeks. Why? Because she stopped interrupting herself every few seconds, which meant her ideas could actually flow. Technique number 2 is what I call the bridge method. When you don't know the exact word or phrase, don't freeze. Build a bridge to your meaning using the words you do know. Let me give you an example. Last week, one of my students couldn't remember the word entrepreneurship. Instead of stopping and looking frustrated, she said, when someone creates their own business, like being the boss of yourself. Perfect! Everyone understood exactly what she meant. This is actually something native speakers do all the time. We say things like, that thingy, you know what I mean? Or, it's like we don't have perfect recall of every word in every moment, and neither should you be expected to. But here's technique number 3, and this is the big one, the confidence anchor. Before you speak, remind yourself of one simple truth. My ideas matter more than my accent. Say it with me. My ideas matter more than my accent. Maria started doing this before every meeting, every presentation, every phone call. She would take a deep breath and remind herself that she was there because she had something valuable to contribute, not because of how she sounded while contributing it. And you know what's beautiful about this mindset? It's contagious. When you believe your ideas matter, other people start believing it too. When you speak with purpose instead of apology, people listen with interest instead of judgment. Now, let's talk about something that might surprise you. Cultural communication differences aren't mistakes, they're features. In Brazilian Portuguese, you might say, I have 25 years old. In English, we say, I am 25 years old. But here's the thing, both make perfect logical sense. Portuguese treats age as something you possess. English treats it as something you are. Neither is wrong. They're just different ways of seeing the world. This is why I encourage my students to embrace what I call global English. It's English that carries hints of your cultural background, your unique perspective, your personal story, because that's exactly what makes you interesting to listen to. I remember teaching a Japanese businessman who was embarrassed about his accent. I told him, your accent isn't a flaw, it's your brand. When people hear you speak, they immediately know you bring an international perspective. That's incredibly valuable in today's global economy. 6 months later, he sent me a video of himself giving a TED Talk in Tokyo, in English, about cross-cultural innovation. His accent was still there, stronger than ever, and it was beautiful. It was part of his story. But let's address the elephant in the room. Grammar. Oh, grammar. The source of so much anxiety for English learners everywhere. Here's my controversial opinion. Grammar is overrated. Don't get me wrong. Grammar is important. It helps us communicate clearly and efficiently. But it's a tool, not a treasure. You don't need perfect grammar to be understood, respected, or successful in English. Think about it this way. If someone says, "I go to store yesterday," do you understand what they mean? Of course you do. The grammar isn't standard, but the communication is crystal clear. And in real-world conversations, that's what matters most. Here's a little secret from the world of linguistics. English is actually one of the most flexible languages on the planet. We borrow words from everywhere, we create new expressions constantly, and we bend grammatical rules whenever it serves our purpose. Shakespeare invented over 1,700 words that we still use today. He literally made up language, and we call him a genius. So why are you so hard on yourself for being creative with English? Why do you apologize for bringing your linguistic background into the mix? You're not speaking broken English. You're speaking global English, international English, your English. Now, I want to share something that happened to me recently that perfectly illustrates this point. I was in a taxi in Sao Paulo, and the driver started speaking to me in English. His grammar wasn't textbook perfect, but his stories were incredible. He told me about growing up in a small town in Minas Gerais, about his dreams of traveling the world, about his daughter who was studying engineering. For 40 minutes, I was completely captivated. His English carried the rhythm and warmth of Portuguese, and it was beautiful. It was real. It was human. And when I got out of that taxi, I thought, this man speaks better English than most of my American friends. Not because his grammar was perfect, it wasn't, but because he used English to connect, to share, to build a bridge between two strangers from different worlds. That's what language is for. This brings me to one of the most important concepts I teach: functional fluency. This is the ability to function effectively in English-speaking environments, regardless of whether your English sounds like a textbook or a movie. Functional fluency means you can express your ideas clearly, understand others when they speak to you, and participate meaningfully in conversations. It means you can order food without pointing at the menu, explain your job to someone at a party, and ask for help when you need it. And here's the beautiful thing about functional fluency. You probably already have it. You might not realize it because you're so focused on what you can't do that you're missing everything you can do. Maria had functional fluency when she first came to see me. She could understand complex technical documents. She could write detailed emails. She could follow presentations and take notes. But she convinced herself she couldn't speak English because her pronunciation wasn't perfect, and she sometimes mixed up her tenses. It took me 3 sessions to show her videos of herself speaking. "Maria," I said, "listen to this conversation you just had with me. You explained your entire project, asked thoughtful questions, and told me a funny story about your cat. How is that broken English?" The look on her face, it was like she was seeing herself clearly for the first time. She wasn't broken, she was bilingual, and that's a superpower, not a weakness. Speaking of superpowers, let's talk about code switching. This is something bilingual people do naturally, switching between languages or adapting your language style for different situations. You probably do this in Portuguese without thinking about it. You talk differently with your grandmother than you do with your coworkers, right? The same principle applies to English. You don't need to sound like a BBC news anchor in every situation. When you're chatting with friends, casual English is perfect. When you're presenting to clients, more formal English might be appropriate. This isn't being fake, it's being strategic. Native speakers do this too. I sound completely different when I'm talking to my mom versus when I'm giving a professional presentation versus when I'm hanging out with friends. We all have different registers, different versions of ourselves for different contexts. But here's where it gets really interesting. Research shows that people who speak English with an accent are often perceived as more trustworthy, more hardworking, and more intelligent than monolingual speakers. Why? Because speaking a second language demonstrates cognitive flexibility, cultural awareness, and dedication to learning. Your accent isn't a limitation, it's evidence of your capabilities. It tells people, I didn't just learn one way of seeing the world. I learned 2, 3, maybe more. I can think across cultures and communicate across boundaries. That's incredibly valuable in our interconnected world. Companies are actively looking for people with global perspectives, multicultural communication skills, and the ability to connect with diverse audiences. Your different English isn't holding you back. It's setting you apart in the best possible way. Now, let's get into some specific strategies for building confidence and improving fluency simultaneously. The first is what I call the story method. Every week, choose one story from your life and practice telling it in English. Start simple. Maybe it's about your weekend, a childhood memory, or a funny thing that happened at work. Tell this story to yourself in the mirror. Record yourself telling it, or share it with a language exchange partner. The magic happens when you tell the same story multiple times. You'll notice that each time it gets smoother, more natural, more confident. Why does this work? Because you're not just practicing English, you're practicing being yourself in English. You're finding your voice, your rhythm, your way of expressing who you are in a second language. Maria started with the story of how she decided to become an engineer. The first time she told it, it took her 15 minutes and was full of pauses and corrections. By the 10th time, she could tell it in 5 minutes with passion, humor, and perfect clarity. More importantly, she felt like herself while telling it. The second strategy is the question technique. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, focus on asking questions. Questions are powerful because they show engagement. They keep conversations flowing, and they give you time to think while the other person is talking. Practice different types of questions. Information questions. What do you think about? clarification questions, "Could you explain what you mean by?" and follow-up questions. "That's interesting. How did you—" Having a repertoire of questions gives you confidence in any conversation. The third strategy might surprise you. Embrace silence. Many language learners feel like they need to fill every pause with words, even if those words are just and apologies. But strategic silence is powerful. It gives you time to think, it makes your words more impactful, and it shows confidence. Native speakers use silence all the time. We pause to think, we let important points sink in, we use silence for emphasis. You can do the same thing. Instead of rushing to fill every gap, take a breath, organize your thoughts, and then speak with intention. But here's something even more important than techniques and strategies: mindset. The way you think about your English directly impacts how you speak it. If you approach every conversation thinking, "I hope I don't make mistakes," you're setting yourself up for anxiety and self-consciousness. Instead, try thinking, "I'm excited to share my perspective," or "I wonder what I'll learn from this conversation," or "My story matters regardless of how I tell it." This shift in mindset changes everything: your body language, your voice, your entire presence. I learned this lesson from one of my most memorable students, Carlos. Carlos was a chef who wanted to improve his English so he could work in international kitchens. His grammar was, admittedly, pretty rough. His vocabulary was limited. But Carlos had something more valuable than perfect syntax. He had passion. When Carlos talked about food, even with his imperfect English, people listened. His eyes lit up, his hands moved expressively, his whole being came alive. He would describe flavors in ways that made your mouth water, even if he used the wrong tense while doing it. One day, I told him, "Carlos, stop trying to speak perfect English. Start trying to share your passion perfectly." That changed everything for him. He stopped focusing on grammar rules and started focusing on communication goals. Instead of thinking, "How do I say this correctly?" he started thinking, "How do I make them feel what I feel?" 6 months later, Carlos was offered a position at a prestigious restaurant in Miami. During his interview, the head chef later told me he had made several grammatical errors, but his passion for cooking came through so clearly that they hired him on the spot. That's the power of authentic communication over perfect grammar. When you speak from the heart, people listen with their hearts. When you share something you're passionate about, your imperfect English becomes secondary to your perfect enthusiasm. This brings me to one of my favorite concepts, the authenticity advantage. When you try to sound like someone else, like a textbook, like a movie character, like your English teacher, you lose the most interesting thing about your communication. Your unique way of expressing ideas, your cultural perspectives, your personal experiences, your individual humor. All of this gets lost when you try to fit into someone else's linguistic mold. But when you embrace your authentic voice, even in a second language. You become magnetic. I remember attending a conference where there were speakers from 12 different countries, all presenting in English. The most memorable presentation wasn't from the native English speaker with perfect pronunciation. It was from Dr. Amara, a researcher from Morocco, whose English carried the beautiful rhythms of Arabic and French. She told stories that could only come from her background. She used metaphors that were uniquely her own, and she connected with the audience in a way that felt completely genuine. Her English wasn't textbook perfect, but it was perfectly her, and that made all the difference. I remember attending a conference where there were speakers from 12 different countries, all presenting in English. The most memorable presentation wasn't from the native English speaker with perfect pronunciation. It was from Dr. Amara, a researcher from Morocco, whose English carried the beautiful rhythms of Arabic and French. She told stories that could only come from her background. She used metaphors that were uniquely her own, and she connected with the audience in a way that felt completely genuine. Her English wasn't textbook perfect, but it was perfectly her, and that made all the difference. You know what? I've been talking for almost 40 minutes, and I feel like I'm just getting started. We've covered so much ground today. The myths about broken English, the power of functional fluency, the strategies that transformed Maria and Carlos and hundreds of other students. But there's something I haven't told you yet, something that happened just last week that completely changed how I think about confidence in English. Something that involves a 7-year-old girl, an international business meeting, and a revelation that will probably surprise you as much as it surprised me. And here's the thing. This discovery isn't just heartwarming, it's practical. It's a technique you can use immediately, starting today, to eliminate speaking anxiety and start communicating with the confidence you already possess. But I'm out of time for today, and honestly, this story deserves its own episode. It's that powerful. So here's what I want you to do before our next episode. I want you to record yourself telling a story, any story, for exactly 3 minutes. Don't worry about mistakes. Don't stop to correct yourself. Just talk. Tell me about your day, your dreams, your favorite childhood memory, anything. Then listen to that recording, and instead of focusing on what's wrong with it, I want you to notice what's right. Notice the moments where you expressed exactly what you meant to express. Notice where your personality shines through. Notice how much English you actually know and use naturally. Because next week, I'm going to share that 7-year-old's wisdom, reveal the confidence technique that changed everything, and show you exactly how to use your recording to unlock a level of English confidence you never knew you had. Until then, remember, you're not speaking broken English. You're speaking brave English. You're speaking international English. You're speaking your English. And that's exactly what the world needs to hear. This has been Core English. I'm your host, Lana Rose, and I'll see you next week for a conversation that just might change everything you think you know about confidence and communication. Keep speaking, keep growing, and most importantly, keep being authentically you in any language. Beautiful. That's the mindset you need. So don't stop here. Keep listening, keep speaking, keep learning. And remember, every time you practice, you are not just improving your English. You are creating a new version of yourself, more confident, more fluent, more powerful. Thank you for being here with me today. This is Core English, and I am proud of the journey you are making. See you in the next episode. Kisses. Goodbye.